There we go. It says you are live. I already see Dan O'Neill, one of my Patreon supporters, is in the chat, and comedy preppers, comedy prepper says the debate was ridiculous. Welcome everybody. We are back with late night gun chat. I think we got my internet settled in the new house. It is a little slower, so let me know if I start roboting. Of course, we got Matthew Pepper with us tonight. Alaska One Andy is here. There are 3 people watching. 67 Rebel, SST always here. Good to see you. And you know, I am watching on streaming, so the chat is a little slow. But we got Magic Prepper here tonight. If you don't know Magic Prepper's channel, make sure you go over and check it out. I don't know how you're subscribed to me if you're not subscribed to him. Pat RMC is here, American Fitness, John Phaser, Communist Gator. Hello. It's the first time I've seen you in the chat. Good to see you, Old Doc Sims. So anyway, so Magic Prepper, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got your channel started and why you're doing the prepping thing and how far you take it. We were discussing that in the pre-chat. So, and if you guys got questions for Magic Prepper, put them in the chat box and we'll make sure you get it. Thrilled to see you, MG. Thanks, AB. Cool. All right. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I started the channel back in 2019. It was just something I wanted to try out. You know, I have been watching prepping channels, gun channels, all the good stuff, you know, for years, and finally decided I was in a position to start sharing some of what I had learned, you know. And of course, in the beginning, there was a lot of interesting choices when it came to making the videos. I mean, there's a lot of advice out there about how you have to make 100 crappy videos before you actually figure out how YouTube works. So, you know, that's something that I still believe in, because if you look back on my older videos, you can tell the difference now. But I wanted to share information about prepping. And I think one of the biggest things that I was looking to do was to network. I wanted to talk to other people with a prepared mindset. I wanted to build a community. I wanted to hopefully interact with other preppers who are out there that have more knowledge than I do and try to kind of better myself. So it started out as just something I wanted to give a try to, and it's kind of turned into something that I really enjoy. When it comes to prepping, I think I started back in 2010, 2011 is when I started getting more serious with it. I started my journey towards preparedness as a kid, though, living in Florida, where we had to prepare for hurricane season on the yearly basis. I was also in Boy Scouts, so being prepared was just something that was drilled into our heads. And I think once I was a young adult living on my own, I'd moved to California, and the political spectrum of the country was in a different place than it was when I was a kid. I decided that it was time to start pushing things forward in the sense of being more self-reliant and self-sufficient. So that's kind of what got me to where I am now. Now I'm a family man, you know, I've got a career, I've got kids, I've got a wife, and I just want to keep preparing so that they're as well taken care of as they can be in case anything happens. So it's kind of what got me all started and kind of where I'm at this point. I will say that when it comes to my lifestyle, when and it revolving around preparedness, I spend a lot of my free time, you know, researching or acquiring equipment or learning new skills, but we don't let it, you know, engulf our lives in total. So we still spend a lot of time as a family just doing things we enjoy, and we don't prepare in the sense of doom and gloom. You know, we prepare so that we can feel comfortable and, you know, well taken care of in case something was to ever happen. So it's not something that engulfs our lives 24/7, but it is something that is regularly thought about.
Oh, awesome. So, man, I had a question, but Luke Tilley gave us $5. So, Luke, thank you for the super chat there. And
thanks, Luke.
Yeah. So let's dive in. We came up with these top 5 lists, top 5 scenarios. And so I'm going to have you share what are the top 5 scenarios you think people should be prepping for right now?
Well, so right now is different than what I would say is my general consensus, okay? Right now, I think if you are in a suburban or an urban environment, civil unrest is definitely something you should be prepared for. So I would say you should be focusing on, maintaining your security, making sure your home defense plan is enacted and, well thought out, and then investing in some of the basic necessities of that, which would be, ways of security, including, a camera system, and then having, a way to defend yourself, of course, a firearm and training and everything else related to that. When it comes to what I prepare for, when I think of like a grand list of SHTF events that I think could happen, for me, I guess we'll start from the least to the most important in the sense of what I find to be priority. For me, like number 5 on the list would be any kind of a large scale natural disaster. And the reason I say that is because it's an inevitability more than it is a theory. It's not something that is theoretical. It's something that we know for a fact will happen and does happen every year in different parts of the country. And also is something that we know has a track record and a history of having cataclysmic sized events occurring here on the planet. So when it comes to an asteroid strike, or it comes to the Yellowstone supervolcano, or any of those types of events that we know are inevitable to happen again at some point, I think it's important to prepare for them. Now, one of the things related to that is that you can't prepare for where the event will occur. You can't prepare for how large of an event it might be. So you can't just focus on large-scale natural disasters, because in some ways you can't prepare for them to negate their effects, but you can prepare in a generalized sense to say, if it happens and it doesn't immediately affect my area, I can at least get through the initial onslaught of what happens and then move forward from there. So that's why it'd be number 5 for me. And I don't know, do you want to discuss these things in between each one, or do you want me to just go right through the list?
Yeah, let's kind of discuss it between each one. So I have natural disaster on my list too. Mine's a little higher because like you growing up in Florida with hurricanes, we had an earthquake here 2 years ago. And it was pretty cool though. I listed it as 7.0 or a 7.1, which is pretty stout for an earthquake. I was driving while it happened. I was actually running late to work because I stopped to grab breakfast, and I was driving down the road, and I thought, I have a vehicle that's older and now paid off and everything, and I thought maybe the motor mounts were going bad because the engine started shaking, like the engine was dropping, and pretty soon I realized everything around me is swaying pretty bad, and I'm having a hard time. I'm like, I didn't hit any ice. It was winter. There was a little bit of snow and ice on the road. There always is. I had studded tires in and everything. Didn't hit any ice. I'm like, why am I sliding sideways? And all of a sudden I realized, hey, I'm in an earthquake. And so I slow down to 10 miles an hour, and I literally see one of the street signs signs that goes across one of the street signs doing this number. It's pretty good. All right. Oh wow, we got another super chat. Officer Greg, OG's danger show. So we have a celebrity giving us a super chat. But a cool guy still. Thanks for all hard work. Love the stuff you and Chook put out. Thanks, man. I'm glad you watch our channels, and Chook's a good guy, even though we give each other crap all the time. But yeah. OG also said he's going to squeeze into the T-shirt again. I do have my Alaskan shirt on tonight. It's the Alaskan flag with all gun laws are infringements. So
T-shirt.
Mine is a 2X OG. I should have bought more 2Xs for you, brother. But keep it real down there in California, man. Celebrity, you got the wrong guy. Hey, your finger wiggles are celebrities, OG. Your finger wiggles, not you, but your finger wiggles. So you invented that. So anyway. Yo, what's up with your bears eating my neighbor? I don't know, Daniel. Daniel got as my judge. You're going to have to do that. We got Big Dre 357 in here. Cool. So we got a lot of people in here. But anyway, back to natural disasters and the earthquake. So we weren't without power for any significant amount of time. We weren't without any, we didn't have looting and rioting, and we had some stealing. We had some people doing some stealing out of stores, but we didn't have like we had normal shoplifting. We had
Right.
we had an influx of shoplifting, but we didn't have looting per se, which I guess is a form of looting. But there are people, so that's that. So anyway, I kind of do that. My number 5 I actually had on the list was an EMP, and it's just because while I don't think there's a lot you can do to do an EMP without investing tons of money to prep for it, like getting an older vehicle that doesn't have, a computer system in it, and having electrical parts for it, like a carburetor and an alternator and anything that takes electricity in it and a battery sitting around. So like that right there is, extremely difficult. Having ham radios and stuff stored inside of boxes and hoping somebody else does too. So I think for like an EMP, like the best thing you can do is like have a garden, have a separate, power supply that's downstairs in your basement where it's not going to be, hit so hard by the EMP, like a solar panel and some batteries and stuff like that. And then have all your batteries in ammo cans and stuff like that where they're sealed. And, other than that, make a Faraday cage. And other than that, it's like, what else are you going to do? Security. I mean, the reason why I put it so low on the list is while it's very possible, all it takes is one nuclear bomb tuned to the right frequency, across the United States. I think it was, to be honest with you, it would be more of, one bomb takes the lower 48. But if they don't have the thoughtfulness to use 2 bombs and take the lower 48 and part of Canada and Alaska, then it's kind of it's kind of not something I worry about as an EMP. So that's kind of why it's number 5 on my list. It's there. It's a real threat, and North Korea or Iran could do it at any time. Russia, France, Britain, India, Pakistan, any of the nuclear powers could do it at any time.
Right.
Well,
my thoughts on EMP is just that it's a tag along to some kind of our larger conflict, So I kind of group it into the same category as a global conflict or world war of some kind. And a large scale EMP event's not going to happen without consequences related to retaliation. So although it is definitely a possibility, and preparing for some kind of a grid down scenario is a good way to go, I also feel like it will bring along the effects of a large scale conflict with it. So I kind of prepare for them as one and the same. And I think my list right now, a war of some kind would be like number 3 on the list.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So let's go to your number 4 then. What would you say your number 4 on top 5 from scenarios to prepare for?
So number 4 is interesting, and the list I'm using, something that I kind of just reference occasionally so I can kind of prioritize what I'm preparing for. On the number 4 spot, it was a global pandemic, and that's because there was a high chance of one occurring at least at some point in our lifetime. Now, I don't think the parameters of what we're dealing with right now meets the criteria for what my expectation was of what a pandemic would look like in the sense of lethality and spread. But I can say that, having that preparation in mind and having the additional gear that I had, in my home to combat the situation that we were presented with back in March, definitely gave me some peace of mind. Now, a lot of that stuff wasn't required based on the evidence of what's happening currently, but it is still something that can happen again and in a lot worse way. And I think that right now, when it comes to preparing for a pandemic, we should prepare in the sense of being aware that something much, much worse than what we're facing right now can actually still happen, and then not being foolish to the point of assuming that whatever happens next is going to have the same criteria as what we're seeing right now, and then not taking it seriously or not, listening to people who are in positions of power saying, that this is different or this is more lethal or the fatality rate's higher or whatever it might be. Because unfortunately, this situation we're currently in has created a lot of doubt in the sense of people's minds of, what this whole pandemic situation is. And I just worry that in the future, myself included, we might see another, similar biological threat come out and then not take it seriously when it actually is, in fact, the pandemic we were all preparing for originally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, this is the pandemic that cried wolf, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. So Dan O'Neill, who's one of my Patreon supporters. Thank you for all your support, brother. He says space rock is what we need to prepare for. And I have an answer to this, and is if there's an asteroid coming, we should actually celebrate and not prepare, because that thing's probably littered with gold and platinum, and we could go mine that thing. Any sufficiently advanced society will actually welcome a space rock coming their way. That means it takes less delta V on your rocket to get there. I watch a lot of space science channels on YouTube because it's fun. That's my go-to. One of my favorite science and futurism is Isaac Arthur. He has a great channel and wonderful videos on everything out there, from asteroid mining to colonizing, all in known science, to colonizing Alpha Centauri. How do we do that in known science where you can't travel in the speed of light? Great stuff. If you guys haven't watched it before, it's and his voice is soothing. He has a great microphone. So after I watched an episode for the information, and then I watched it again to fall asleep. So it's pretty good. But yeah, so space rock, any sufficiently, like right now, it would be a problem if we knew it was coming. But like in the next 20 years, I doubt that's going to be a problem anymore. At least in the next 2 generations. Like a major space rock would actually be a welcoming event. Oh boy, there's a whole bunch of gold and platinum on our way. Let's go mine that thing, nuke the pieces that are left, and go home. So that's what do you think about space rock?
I mean, honestly, I have that in the same category as large-scale natural disaster, right? Like, it can definitely happen, and it's going to happen at some point again, because with the unpredictability of asteroids flying around space, one of them eventually will cross paths with the Earth again. So it's just got to happen one day. So let's just hope if that happens within our lifetime that it hits somewhere like Antarctica, then we can go mine it.
What was the one that was a few years ago? The Chilean, the one that burned up and like detonated over the Russian town, the Chelyabinsk asteroid. One channel I was watching said there's one like that in the Pacific Ocean every year, and we just never notice it because it's not over land. Right. And we notice it on radar, like we know it's there in the middle of the ocean, or Antarctica, or the Arctic, North Arctic Ocean. We know it's there, but it happens, but it's not a big deal. With the Chelyabinsk, asteroid, and that one just detonated. It was a cool scene. It blew out windows, and I think some people lost their lives, but not many. It was like 13, which is pretty good for an asteroid strike, I would say, as opposed to millions.
Now, was that the same event that was mistaken for like a nuclear blast back when that happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah,
I think it was. So at first, and then they had that. So Daniel God is my judge. Has this says HSTF has already started. It's a slow burn, one riot at a time. And the riots escalating every year. This fall, winter, food shortages, and inflation. Very well could be right. Yeah. So
it is a slow burn. It's not something that just happens overnight, unless there is that cataclysmic event, aka EMP, asteroid strike, something along those lines. Otherwise, we should expect it to just slowly go downhill until we don't realize we're at the bottom.
Yeah. Leach Phillips says, I wanted to get to this because this is something I don't know about. So if you don't know about it, hopefully we'll get him in here. But solar and wind systems should be able to survive EMP. Shouldn't be too expensive to rig it that way. An important buying point to consider. So do you know how to rig a solar or wind system for EMP proofing it? Or
there's a lot of different information out there on what an EMP could actually affect in the sense of small electronics, right? So there's not really a guarantee of it will affect or it won't affect certain things. Like, some people don't even actually think they would affect a vehicle, because a car in itself is almost like its own miniature Faraday cage, because it's a steel box with everything inside insulated. So those are things that if you want to play it safe, you would take your power inverter, and you would take your charge controller and everything else related to your solar setup, and keep it in a Faraday cage for use after the fact if that's what you were concerned about. But there isn't necessarily a guarantee that it wouldn't work even if you didn't do that. So that's something that a lot of people discuss, like whether or not it's worth storing it in a Faraday cage just to be safe, or if there's even a chance it would actually affect it. And to be honest, what Leach said about how it shouldn't be too expensive to rig it that way. A lot of people just say you just need to ground things when it comes to deflecting the electromagnetic pulse waves. So if you have a way to ground your solar system, it should have basically, a path for that pulse to travel around your electronics and down into the ground. That's the idea anyway. And it's not expensive to put together a solar system in general, just as like backup power. Not if you want to power your entire house and all your appliances, but if you want something that's capable of just plugging in some small electronics, making sure things are charged, making sure you have lights and stuff like that. I'll actually be having a video coming out in the next few weeks where I actually bought like the least expensive solar generator setup I could buy to see if it works or not. Because, one of the things that I try to bring to people's attention is if something is budget friendly or if it is affordable for those of us who are in a financial position just to buy top quality everything. Is it worth it? Like, is it still worth your money, or should you just save up? So that's something I'm going to test out. And if we can, this solar generator kit was $150 minus the battery and the panel. So, that's extremely inexpensive compared to some of the, like the Goal Zero Yetis and stuff like that out there,
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for that video because I need to get back into that. All my solar panel stuff is in Georgia, so and that's a long story. So we got number 4 on my list was the natural disaster. Did we cover number 4 on your list on the top 5 here already? Which you said was
was the pandemic. Yep,
pandemic. Yeah. So let's move to number 3. What would be in number 3 for you?
So number 3 for me was global conflict, or a war of some kind on American soil. So maybe not necessarily full on global war, but if something in an armed conflict sense was to happen here in the United States, it's something that we should prepare for, because there's always a chance that that's going to happen, even if it's accidental. Something like Bay of Pigs event, back in the 60s could easily lead to conflict here on American soil if somebody does things inappropriately during that time, So I'm not talking, straight up Red Dawn situation, but I think it is something that if you consider that concept of a foreign invasion on American soil, then preparing for that puts you in a much better position than if you don't prepare for something like that at all.
Right. Leach Phillips says we can divert some asteroids if we have time and the will. Yeah, that's true. I think we should divert them to Mars if they're full of hydrogen and water. Personally,
do some terraforming.
Terraforming, that's right. And anyway, let's see. Leach, I'm glad you're here. The first time I've seen you in the chat. So there's actually some surge protectors we could buy for an EMP. Yeah.
So and EMP shield sells what's basically like a surge protector for your vehicle, for your home. There's a lot of different things they have, and apparently they have contracts with the Department of Defense and everything as well. I wish there was a better way to test their products, because it seems like there's not a definitive way to do that. Unless somebody knows of a way or has tried that before and has that experience, then definitely let me know, because I have talked to them before about testing out their stuff, but I wanted to find out if there was a way to actually show that it will work, and there's just really not, at least from the information they gave me. So that's just something to always consider. It's really hard for me, because I'm skeptical to not look at those types of products as almost the same idea as like a snake oil salesman, because you really won't know if it works unless an EMP goes off, and then if it doesn't work, does that even matter at that point? In the sense of, doing business, I don't know. Right. So that's just something to consider,
Something to consider. You couldn't hit it with a taser? I'm just saying, like, put a device like right next to some water and tase it, or run it. I don't know.
What you'd have to do is generate some kind of an EMP to prove whether or not the electronics exposed to it are going to maintain, functionality after. So I don't know. That's just me, I guess. Maybe I think too hard about these things. Maybe I should be more trusting.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, no, you might be right too. There's just no way to test it unless you make an EMP, which is probably illegal on many levels.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to get myself in that position, I don't think,
Yeah. So for me, I had number 3. I have a supply shortage, and I have that high on my list. Just from COVID and the shipping to Alaska here was very difficult. So we bought a new house. Our new house did not come with a refrigerator. So we went into Lowe's and Home Depot, and I had $1,000 from YouTube money. I'm like, hey, I'm going to put this on a refrigerator, right? And that was good advertising month. And so I'm like, I'll put this on a refrigerator. And we go in there. I go, here's my budget. This is what we want. And basically, it was like one of those things. It was like going to a car lot where every car had been sold, and they were just waiting to drive them off the lot. Like, they didn't sell the floor models, and so anything that we wanted was gone. Like, we could not get the refrigerator we wanted. He had to look up an online order that was sitting in the store for more than 30 days, cancel that person's online order, and sell us that refrigerator. There was literally no refrigerators in the state of Alaska anywhere in backstock. So they only had the floor models. And so that got me thinking, hey, what if it's, 3 weeks of shipping without no shipping up here at all? I mean, most people, a good portion of the people up here would do okay with moose meat and salmon in the freezer. But, supply shortage or shipping shortage would be bad. And in the middle of the summer, Costco is limiting you to 3 types of meat. You could get 3 containers of meat. So 1 container of chicken, 1 container of pork, or 1 container of beef. I don't eat pork because of my special diet, but so I went up there with like 4 things of turkey burger and 1 thing of beef and 1 thing of chicken. They're all looking at me strange, but then they said, "Oh no, it's only chicken. It's not turkey." So I was able to get 5 packages of meat, and that way. And I eat most of the turkey burger anyway for my dietary issues. So that's that.
Well,
67 Rebel says there's no freezers either. Hey man, if you're here in Alaska, you can come pick up a small freezer in my driveway. It's still in my driveway. It works.
That was a shortage that a lot of people ran into. Was people were trying to buy chest freezers, specifically for storing frozen food and meat and stuff like that. And there was a run on them. So yeah, a lot of places were out of those, which, it's, and shortages, what the pandemic did for, at least my thought process was just showed how fragile the supply line is. I mean, it really did. And I'll be honest, I'm always trying to be open-minded about where I'm going to end up next. What's our next move? What's a good locale to move to in the sense of, quality of life combined with the ability to be more prepared for something like, an event like that to happen. And that's always one of my hesitations with the state of Alaska is like, man, you're just over there, you know what I mean? Which is great for some situations, but bad for like you said, the supply chain and getting supplies shipped to you because you're not part of the contiguous 48. So that's just something that has always kind of come up. And it's something, when I've talked to my wife in the past about Alaska as being an option, she that's like her biggest thing. She's like, I don't know if I want to be separated from the rest of the country. I guess there's reasons behind that.
Yeah, there's a great feeling when you first get here about, man, all these mountains, I can go hiking every day and stuff like that. But there is a feeling of being trapped here because you can't travel through Canada and you can't go south unless you're on a boat or a plane. And
right.
So like it's difficult, and almost every flight goes through Seattle. So now if I'm talking about moving my guns, I've got to ship them, or look for a direct flight I can take my guns on to a pro-gun state. And so it's difficult. Like we traveled and connected in Florida or in California last year, so I didn't take any guns. Of course, we also went on an international cruise out of Florida, so on the same trip. So that I didn't take any guns anyway. But like it was like I couldn't even take any guns because what if I'm passing through what is my baggage doing passing through California? And I go to Atlanta, where I'm from originally, and it's like that's not good.
Yeah.
John Fazer got a freezer shipped to Home Depot and Fairbanks. Good job, man. That's good.
Nice.
Antonio Claudio Michael says there's no dishwashers and freezers. R4 Mississippi Thunder is sleeping on the couch tonight or in the doghouse. One of the two. Let me know how all that dog hair is. Now, this is a little prepping joke me and a friend did, and when I lived in Mississippi, but we were always making smart aleck comments and getting ourselves in the doghouse, which I do now too. But we were talking about like having a doghouse that you could in the backyard, like your prototypical doghouse, and you could just lift it up and there's stairs going down to a man cave. Like I think that's
not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea at all. Like, oh darn, I'm in the doghouse. It's like so not a bad idea.
Yeah.
So,
that reminds me. I think earlier, I want to say it was Comedy Prepper asked about the theme song in my videos, and yes, I wrote that music. It was with my band, and I was in a band for 5 years actually. So that music in my intro and my outro is something that we wrote, and yes, it's my voice on the backup vocals for the outro. But it reminded me of that because here's the best part. Okay, we were not businessmen, and we were definitely what's the best word? Very confident. So our name was terrible. It was dog food. So our house was called the Dog House, and people would actually come party at our house after concerts, and everyone would say, party at the Dog House. So I lived at the Dog House for like 5 years. So that's just something that's kind of always stuck with me because I'm like, man, I can never get out of that dog house. And and now I'm married. I live with my wife, and many times I'm still in the doghouse because I am just that guy, I guess. So
yeah. Oh, I hear there's a silver shortage on the way. Yeah, there's probably a silver shortage on the way. Coin shortage already. To me, this coin shortage that we're going through, is it a prelude to like an economic collapse or like there's a true dollar shortage? Which I don't think it is because the Federal Reserve has been printing money like crazy. So how could we have a dollar shortage if they're printing money like crazy? That's what's going to cause inflation. Inflation is actually defined as an increase in the money supply, not increase in prices. People don't think about that too much. The increase in the money supply causes the increase in prices, and if you increase it too much, Leech Philip again. It's going back to World War II with the Japanese balloon attacks. And those are some crazy stories. The only people to die on the U.S. mainland were from a Japanese balloon. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to go to number 2 for me is civil unrest, excessive civil unrest, and we're seeing that in parts of the country right now, really for no reason. I mean, there's no reason. And the other thing about it is that I talked to one of my cop buddies, and they're like, they're not even telling the whole story. George Floyd, the officer's cam shows knee on the back, not knee on the neck, and the ambulance is already there. And the autopsy report shows no damage to the guy's throat or to his neck. So like I was one of those to be like, okay, yeah, cop messed up there. He messed up big time. He should be in trouble according to the cell phone video. But when you look at the rest of it, I mean, they're even lying about George Floyd a lot. So it's like I'm probably got to turn the monetization off for this now that I've talked about George Floyd. But
probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like they're even lying about that. So it's like there's massive civil unrest for no reason. Now, what's kind of cool is there is protest here in Alaska, and then there's pro-police counter-protest, and like everybody's neighbors here, and like there were some Antifa types that were shipped up here or whatever, and like their side stopped them with guns because everybody has a gun here in Alaska. So it's like they're trying to burn down some crap, and this comes from firsthand knowledge of a guy who was on the pro-police side who was at the same event, counter protesting over here and protesting over here, and like they all go home and they're all like, no, you don't light anything on fire here, their side and our side, or whatever side you're on, whatever. So it was kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
3 times a week. No. Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we have to, always consider. I mean, when it comes to preparing, you prepare for these types of things like civil unrest and riots and everything else related to it, just as like a general overview of things that could possibly happen. But when you say that this is happening for no reason, I guess it's more like the reason is not what's being advertised. Obviously the chaos and the fear that's caused by this kind of behavior is utilized, for political aspirations and to generally implement, more authoritarianism in one way or another. So, and whether or not that's from one side of the aisle or if it's from both in one way, who knows? At this point, I don't really trust anybody politically, and it just feels like we know that this transportation of instigators is happening around the country. These people are showing up in buses and being transported all around to wherever these things are supposed to be happening. And the violence is starting to escalate. But I did laugh a little bit because I think it was just today. I read an article where they found like a car that had a Red Cross symbol on it that they pulled over. And then the article said, it's full of weapons, and it was the Red Cross situation was a lie. But then they showed a picture of one of the weapons, and you would love this, but it was like some old beat up 1911 that had rust all over it, and even the magazine was rusted. And I was like looking at that, and I'm like, if this is this really what we're doing? I was just flabbergasted because the news made it sound like this, vehicle was packed to the brim with, firearms, ammunition, everything else. And then the photo is just this like rusty 1911 that I feel like probably was at the bottom of a river and probably won't even operate. So, but still, I mean, it at least shows the example that these people are armed and possibly willing to, use weapons of need. And that's where we're at right now, and that's why, at least on my channel, I constantly remind people to prepare for November. It's not about just preparing for November. It's about using the motivation we have right now in the sense of this is all actually happening and these people are acting this way. We need to keep preparing as if this isn't going to just stop or end, because it probably won't. So that's kind of, the message there, I guess.
All right. Yeah. Big Z says, I've never been to Alaska, but it seems like every day it is getting more populated and disturbed with some of the same problems as the lower 48. Yeah, pretty much. Anchorage is a homeless shanty town. Like they were trying to use COVID money to build this big old homeless shelter where the homeless people could sit around and drink all day. So what happens in Anchorage is there are people that move from villages and they get addicted to alcohol in the villages. A lot of those villages have alcohol banned. I mean, it's straight up prohibition, and like it's smuggled in. Drugs are the same way. And then they come to Alaska or Anchorage and live with their relatives, and their relatives kick them out because they're drunk all the time or they're high all the time. And then we have a huge homeless population. Now that doesn't, not saying that those people have a certain race or a certain ethnic background or anything like that. It happens to people of all races that choose to live out in a village. And like, there's some big issues there where people are, not taking care of their own. They're not taking care of, and so Anchorage has become quite a bit of a homeless problem because of that. And then those people can't get a job. And then like compared to the average place in the lower 48, maybe not like, suburban California or New York or someplace like that. But like compared to the average place, and $1,600 a month for rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Anchorage, just because homeowners association fees are high. In Anchorage itself, there's no more land to build houses. Like land is, it's a little isthmus of a peninsula, and so there's no place to build. And like, if you want to go to the suburbs of Anchorage, there's only 3 on the north side of Anchorage. There's maybe 1 on the south side of Anchorage, and it's 26, 27 miles away on a windy 2-lane road next to the ocean. So it's not really a suburb of Anchorage. So we have this idea where you can't even build houses here anymore. Like there's no room to do it without them taking over a green belt. And so there's that. And then there's there's oil up here, but there's that. And and as the USA keeps adding trillions to the debt, other countries losing confidence in the US dollar, then oil ends up bought and sold off the US petrol dollar. And once that happens, we are screwed. Which brings me to number one on my list, which is a dollar collapse. And that's the last thing that has to happen for a dollar collapse. Generally speaking, in monetary collapses in history, you've had three things happen. You've had excessive government debt, excessive printing of money to cover that debt, and then foreign confidence lost in that money. And I would say we're at 2.5 of those things. Now, every situation is different. And here's where I'm going to be controversial. Hillary Clinton actually saved us from that happening earlier. We should have already had a dollar collapse years ago. And the reason why we didn't was Hillary Clinton invaded Libya. And Libya, they said Gaddafi had mentioned he was going to start taking oil dollars and gold instead of US dollars. And all of a sudden we invade Libya. I don't agree with that war. I don't like Hillary Clinton. Don't get me wrong. But she probably actually saved us from that at that time.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure everybody here thinks you like Hillary Clinton, especially based on your channel,
No, I'm not like Outdoor Ventures that, has posters of her, in bikinis on the wall. But anyway, he has her and Nancy Pelosi. It's crazy. Anyway, so there's that. But, I hate Hillary Clinton. I think I don't hate her as personally, but Libya did want to sell the oil for gold. And can you blame them? Could you blame Libya for wanting to sell oil for gold? No.
No, they were putting their own, country first, basically, is what it came down to.
Yep. And all it takes is one of those countries to take oil for gold, and the United States is absolutely screwed. So I don't think we got your number two on your list. So you want to go ahead with your number two?
Yeah. So my number two is something that I don't necessarily prepare for in the sense of acquiring like gear or skills or knowledge. I guess some of it's knowledge, but my number two, which is a inevitable threat, and it's something that will guaranteed to be, something real in our future, is artificial intelligence. And my concern with artificial intelligence is that we will always push the boundaries, and that most scientists working on AI technology have already admitted that at some point it will surpass the human intelligence, which means it will then decide whether or not it wants us around. And very much in the sense of Terminator and Skynet and everything else like that, a lot of that storyline is based on, real information regarding artificial intelligence and what its process will look like. And I have a fear, I guess I would call it, or at least a theory, that at some point it will be utilized to solve problems that we don't know how to solve, which is supposed to be a good thing, and that's what they call the singularity, right? Where they use artificial intelligence and technology to solve the world's problems and to make it so we don't have to work jobs and there's no shortages and everything's in surplus and whatnot. But what that turns into is something else having control over our lives. And that's eventually going to lead to something bad, because it just has to. And I would say, especially even right now, we're talking about a global pandemic. We're talking about civil unrest. We're talking about contentious election, global conflict. There's a lot of shortages, especially in the food supply. So I could see a technology company utilizing artificial intelligence to solve those problems. And at first, it will look like a good thing. It will turn into a savior mechanism saying, look, this saved our lives and made the world better. We should rely on it more for our daily lives. And next thing you know, we're in some sort of like a subservient situation where we have to rely on the technology or else we don't exist. So that's just, something that I prepare for in the sense of keeping an open mind to what that might look like at some point. And that if we look at what the scientists who are working on artificial intelligence actually say about it, they all agree that eventually will lead to our demise, but they're still moving forward because as scientists, that's what they do. That's their goal. They don't care if it means the end of humanity as we know it. They care about actually making it work and discovering it. So, that's what we're trying to do. And with stacking 9mm, what he's saying about Skynet and AI is coming whether we like it or not, and that the real question is whether or not Elon Musk is doing it for nefarious reasons or for good. I would say, he's probably in the same category as those people who want to move forward and progress regardless of the consequences. And if you want to survive something like artificial intelligence, wouldn't it be better to know it well rather than be on the outside? So that might be something to consider when it comes to those type of people's thought process. The devil right? And that's something that somebody like Elon Musk would know very well compared to us. So that is my number 2, just because it is inevitable. It is something we are constantly working towards. And with quantum computers and everything else that we have access to nowadays, it's only a matter of time until we get artificial intelligence to a point where it exponentially improves itself past the point of, human intelligence.
Yeah. So again, I watched that Isaac Arthur channel on Science and Futurism, and I have to say I have absolutely no worries about AI. And the point of it is that I have worries about people doing AI, but not worries about AI itself, because the whole point of it is if I created an artificial intelligence in this phone right here that had better than human level thinking, right? I put it in a small quantum computer in that, it would have to realize that the person who made it just spent 4.5 billion years climbing up the evolutionary chain and probably has a lot of safeguards in place. So it would have to do some absolutely massive damage. It would have to get to the point where it was like a godlike machine. And I don't think that it's going to spiral out of control like that, because if it's thinking intelligently at all, it knows that we have a plug on it.
Right.
It knows that we have a plug on it. And so especially if it is kept in a separate location, like it's not tied into the main internet, it's only in one network on the building. Like, there is absolutely no way that a super intelligent artificial human being, or artificial human intelligence level or super intelligence level, there's just no way that it could actually harm us, because we could always pull the plug, and it knows that we just climbed up the 4.5 billion year evolutionary chain of survival of the fittest. And it knows, hey, I shouldn't mess with these people, at least not until a certain time. And so Isaac Arthur can make the argument way better than I can, because he is a physicist and a scientist, and studied the Fermi paradox and all that jazz. But yeah, I don't see artificial intelligence as being a threat. I see it as something that it's inevitably under control. Like, yeah, it could make some things better. It could make some things worse. Yes, it's in things already, but I doubt that it's going to actually able to take out the entire world. I think that whole Eagle Eye movie was. It's just not going to be able to do stuff like that. We're going to have too many safeguards in place, too many checks on it. Even if it can run the chess scenario 1,000 moves ahead of us, or 10,000 moves or 1,000,000 moves ahead of us, all we have to do, if we build it right, all we have to do is pull the plug. So,
and I think you touched on the main factor there when you first started talking about it. Is you're right. The human factor is what makes it dangerous. And yeah. I feel like there are definitely people out there who would want to see what might happen. And I think that we're going to see that even nowadays with the unrest and everything else going on in the country, we're going to see people emerge that, want to see what happens when X, Y, and Z, and that's why I think we see things like, buildings burning in the cities, because I think it's it's like a test run. They want to see what they can do and what they can get away with. And so far, I've gotten away with quite a bit without much recourse. So I think that's kind of human nature in many ways too. So nefarious people are definitely out there, and I guess that's where a lot of my distrust comes from.
Yeah, that I agree with totally. The issue is, at what point does an artificial intelligence have rights? There's an issue. If it's got human level intelligence and development, you have a huge issue with, does it have the right to free speech? Does it have the right to freedom of religion? Does it have the right to keep and bear arms? Does it have, so at what point, I believe, despite, I'm a theistic evolutionist, so I believe my rights are granted by my creator, and, and not by God. And so are we the ones granting the AI rights? So there's a lot of ethical issues there, but I honestly, after watching Isaac Arthur, if what you got to worry about is somebody developing it on some asteroid somewhere in the next 20 years and then infecting Earth with it. But I don't think you have to worry about the scientists building the biggest programs on Earth for it. I think you have to. Make sure you prepare. Okay, yeah, whatever. But if you're off grid, and if it's off grid and you're off grid, it's not going to matter. Is off, and by off grid, I mean if it's off communications grid, and we can send internet into it, but not it out to the internet. If we take some basic precautions, all we got to do is pull the plug, and the program would be so huge that it's on a quantum computer, and there's no way that it could transfer itself over the internet and make it all the way to another quantum computer. So,
and that's the unpredictable aspect of it, is once it increases its intelligence level, can it figure out how to do those things without our permission? I guess that's where the chaos theory would come into play.
Yeah, there is.
I want to mention real quick, because there's some chatter going on in the chat about my hair. Okay. This is just the way it's growing in. I have a lot of people ask me, like, oh, do you dye your hair, or why do you make your hair gray in the front? It literally just grows that way, everybody, I promise. So there you go. Now you know.
Well, not good for the rock band. Yeah. So, I'm actually jealous that your hair grows in the front. So
I will take the white hair over no hair, I guess. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I think you and I both had economic collapse as number one. Dollar collapse is like the number one thing to prepare for. And I go ahead.
What I was going to say is, it is something that we see there's a cycle related to, and that it feels very much like we're on the back end of that cycle. And an economic collapse affects everybody, not just us, but the entire world, because if the U.S. economy collapses, the rest of the world's similarly affected. And in my opinion, at least when it comes to a lot of the other items on my list, a lot of them could also emerge as a consequence of an economic collapse, especially conflict. It's pretty much a guarantee that if the U.S. economy collapses, there will probably be some kind of a war at some point, because that is just how things tend to go historically. So, desperate people cause desperate situations, and that is something that we haven't really experienced. The Great Depression was a huge collapse in the sense of the economy, but it was a different time where people weren't as connected, communities weren't able to organize as easily, and the amount of, I guess you would say, distaste for the governing body at the time wasn't able to organize in a way that we would see now. And I feel like that's where we would find ourselves in a really bad predicament, because fringe elements from all around the country would probably spawn organizations that would try to remedy their issues on their own.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm at dollar collapse, and we've already talked about it, but we have 2.5 of the three requirements for a dollar collapse. Now, every situation is just different, but every country that's had a currency collapse has had those three requirements of excessive government printing of money, excessive government debt, and foreign investors losing credit in that debt. And they've already, downgraded the U.S. Credit rating, and they kind of just bypass that, and they keep printing money, and we're on QE infinity now, whatever they want to call it. It's just awful, and part of me, you should be financially responsible, but if you knew the dollar collapse was going to happen tomorrow, go put everything you need on a credit card, because how are you going to owe money on a credit card in a currency that doesn't exist anymore? The bankers will probably find out a way, but you'd probably still be screwed. But it's that's that.
Well, and it's also when you see the indicators, especially with the formation of the BRICS international banking conglomerate, what was that? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, I believe. So they are stepping away from the IMF, which is a big part of the world economy operating the way it currently does, and we're just kind of seeing those red flags pop up. Every year it seems like there's another step being taken to disassociate from the U.S. dollar, and it's just a matter of time until somebody pulls the plug, and that's when things are going to get interesting. And I believe, didn't it recently the yuan get moved into some kind of a foreign exchange related to the petrodollar? I'm trying to remember now. I can't put my finger on it exactly.
I hadn't heard that, actually.
Okay. That's something I have to look back into then. But there was some kind of a change regarding the Chinese yuan. So, and if you guys know in the chat, make sure you put it in there so we can discuss it if need be.
Thing is, who is going to collect the debt? That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. Now, and that's always a subject when it comes to the prepping community. Well, do you just take out a loan and get all the preps and everything you would ever need? And then if things go bad, defaulting, does it even matter? But at the same time, you don't want to prepare in a sense that you're betting on that happening and then finding yourself buried in debt for the rest of your life, So definitely something people consider, though.
Yep. That's what our U.S. government thinks.
Right?
Yeah. You just played it right there. Yep. Yep. So World Bank, World Court. Yep. So, yeah. And I just think the dollar collapse. Okay. So what are some basic preps? You as the prepping expert here, I mean, I've done some, but what are some basic preps everybody should have if you had to pick, like, say, 5 things that would cover most people in this scenario, what would you pick?
Well, I mean, so the first thing is to make sure you have access to water. I think it's overlooked relatively often. A lot of people who are living in apartments or in urban areas, they can store water, but not very much. So have a plan in place for how you're going to retrieve more water. Find a local water source. Get an idea of how you're going to stay hydrated. For me, where I live, I have access to a well. So do you have a way to retrieve water from the well if your power goes out and your pumps don't work? Or, long term, you can't expect a sump pump to work forever. So you have to have other ways to retrieve the water, as well as, just making sure that the water you do have is treatable and potable. So that would be my number one, because we all know that's the shortest amount of time you're going to survive is if you don't have water. 3 days is not a long time. And then after that's food, obviously, because having your own food and being able to, intake calories is going to keep you alive, and it's going to give you security, because if you don't have to find yourself out and about trying to either scavenge or even, just go hunting or whatever else people talk about, what you really need is your own supply of food, your own store of food, that you don't have to rely on anything other than the idea of literally opening it up and possibly preparing it to be able to eat. That gives you security. It also gives you time, because there's a lot of events that could happen where it could blow over after a certain amount of time. So you want to make sure you have enough to get through something substantial. And, maybe not every event is going to put us back into the Stone Age, but you want to at least be able to stay, at your location for a few months and not have to worry about how you're going to feed yourself. So those are things that that I think about when it comes to food. So the third thing, obviously, and this is just, it's hard to say sometimes because I'm not even 100% sure myself on where my priorities are on this list at times. Because part of me wants to say, alternative power and having some kind of a generator or a way to generate your own electricity without relying on the grid, because you want to be able to maintain some of the comfortable aspects of life, or maintain some kind of sense of normalcy for your family maybe, or just have access to things like tools that make life a lot easier, especially, post-collapse situation. However, I find myself always teetering on the idea of security being number 3, because without that, you're not going to be able to protect the food and water sources that you've created. And if you do have electricity, but not a way to protect it or a way to defend yourself when people find out you have electricity, then what kind of position have you put yourself in? So I guess for me, and this is, one of the things that I talk about a lot is, personal security, making sure you have the ability to defend yourself, making sure you have the ability to at least level the playing field when it comes to other people. I mean, obviously the average person can't, meet the same qualifications of a, police or military force. But if we're just talking about keeping other people with, malicious content out of your stores and stocks, then being able to protect yourself is huge. So for me, make sure you have quality firearms, make sure you have ammunition, make sure you know how to use them, and you get some training, and you feel good about, your ability to defend all that investment you've made in food and water and everything else. So then number 4, I guess, would be the alternative power, just so you can try your best to stay ahead of the game. If you have power and other people don't, you're going to have a lot easier time surviving any kind of a situation, And when I think about that, I think about just basic things like keeping your communications up and running, which is going to give you strategic advantage, keeping your tools accessible to you, like being able to recharge my, batteries from my power drill, and then using that drill to fortify my location or make necessary repairs is a huge thing to be able to do. So those things are all things that I consider. And then I would say number 5, just trying to, make sure I touch on the right bases here. But I guess with number 5, it's hard for me because I think that you would want to have a lot of things, when it comes to preparedness and when it comes to survival. But I almost feel like number 5 should just be location. Are you able to have the right location? If you are in an area that is prone to problematic situations, aka civil unrest, or being caught up in the middle of a martial law scenario, if you can invest in being somewhere else or being somewhere more secure or having your own property, that is worth doing. So I put on the priority list not as like this is a prep that's going to save your life, but as a this prep puts you way ahead of the game compared to so many others out there, that it's worth that investment of time and money and everything else related to it, because people are strategic with their location. I mean, think of it in the sense of business. You don't have to advertise if you have a good location. And that's the same with prepping. You don't have to fortify the same way you would if you have a good location. Like we talked about before we started the stream, if you want to be able to garden and grow your own food and, create your own calories, you got to have land and you got to have space and you got to have the ability to do that without drawing a ton of attention to yourself. If you're in the middle of a city and you start growing a survival garden on the roof of your apartment building and something goes down, that apartment building just became a huge target for everybody else who's wondering how they're going to eat. So those are all just things that I would consider, a top 5. It's one of the reasons why I moved from the East Bay area of California out to rural Western North Dakota. It wasn't only because of trying to find a better career path and better my family's financial situation. It was also strategic because we wanted out of California specifically. I could have found a job in California and made more money than what I was making at that time, but I wanted to leave that state for many reasons. Of course, I'm a firearms guy, so that was a huge part of it for me, but it was also the strategic relocation of getting out of a major metropolitan area.
Yeah. Sophia Alcala, I probably screwed that up totally. Alcala, at Magical, suggestions for my bug out bag. You have a video right there on the front of your screen when you visit your channel. As a matter of fact, let me share screen here, and I think we went to yep, right there. It's Bubba 1 year ago, 11,000 views, bug out bag, get home edition. So you got something right there on the front of his channel. So go check out his channel there. Yeah, any suggestions for the bug out bag?
So this is something I believe I took from Bear Independent because he lives by the 5 C's of survival when it comes to a bug out bag. And that's cordage, combustion, cutting, cover, and container. So if you have those 5 categories covered, you have a little bit of everything to get you through. So you want to have some kind of cordage like paracord or something along those lines. Make sure you have a high quality fixed blade knife. You want a container, which I suggest if anything, you need water, right? So you can get a single wall stainless steel water bottle. It allows you to boil things in it if you need to, and it also is sturdy and reliable and lets you carry water, but you can also carry other things in there if you had to. So you want some kind of a container. Combustion's huge. Fire saves lives. Being out in the elements is what usually takes people out, because honestly, we're just not built to be out in the environment anymore. So you want to be able to have some kind of a fire starter. Obviously a lighter will get you there easy. Make sure you have a ferro rod or something like that too as a backup, because you can use it so many times. I believe an average ferro rod gets you about 20,000 strikes. And then cover. So make sure you have a way to keep yourself warm and cover yourself and get yourself out of the elements. And a lot of times I like those like Mylar survival tents and stuff like that, because they're extremely lightweight. They pack really well into a bug out bag. Hopefully you never actually need to use your bag. A get home bag is generally what I suggest people building before they build some kind of an inch bag, because leaving your home should be last resort versus getting home from a job or something, and let's say an emergency happens where you can't drive your vehicle back to your home and you have to hoof it, then you at least have the ability to bring, survival supplies with you. So I like those Mylar tents and stuff like that, because you don't want to have a 5 to 10 pound tent stuck to your back that you might not even use. But those Mylar survival tents weigh nothing, and they just fit inside your backpack. And then if you never use it, it didn't weigh you down. So that'd be like 5 suggestions for things you should just have in general. And then, yeah, if you want to check out that video, I go into detail about everything that's in that get home bag. And I also have links on my channel and stuff for things that I suggest for you guys to check out in case that's something you're interested in. So, I always try to put some of that out there too, just to give people more resources.
Definitely. So, being a gun guy, if you are having to deal with one of these crises that we're talking about, dollar collapse, civil unrest, whatever it is, what are you going to? What is your long gun and your handgun? Obviously, I'm not going to ask if you're doing long gun or handgun. You're a prepper. You've got both on you. So what is your long gun and your handgun going to be?
Well, all right. So as of right now, and this is one of those conversations that I constantly toss around in my head, because I just can't, I'm not satisfied ever. I don't know what it is when it comes to firearms. I'm like, this could be a little better, or this is not exactly what I want. So right now, like if I had to leave my house right this second and go for the long haul, I've been struggling, because I've been running this 300 Blackout AR pistol lately, and it is just awesome. It shoots well. I'm accurate with it. It's so lightweight. It's easy to carry, easy to wield. It's the ammunition is, capable, at least in my experience. 300 Blackout has decent ballistics, in the sense of definitely bringing more to the party than a 5.56. But at the same time, we're not toting around 308 when a lot of engagements might happen within 50 yards. So those are a lot of things I like to consider. And in the pistol package, you still get decent ballistics from a 300 Blackout. And it's so light that, I feel like I could carry it all day long. I do have an awesome AR-10 that is also another option, but it would definitely be situational. Are we talking about civil unrest or possible conflict? Two different things that I might have to consider there, because if we're talking, like, let's say we're talking about conflict, people are bringing up that, you know, China's looking at starting a war with Taiwan and all kinds of stuff like that. You know, if China invades mainland USA, I probably want the 308 because of what it can do, you know, and what it brings to the table. But that extra weight and that extra ammunition weight as well is asking a lot of sacrifice compared to what I could do with that 300 blackout pistol just running around. Now, logistically, you know, the right answer, if you want to say that, would be to grab, you know, one of my ARs and 5.56 and just have the consistency of components and the lightweight ammunition that everybody else would most likely have. But I'm still trying to fall in love with the 5.56 and the AR platform, and I'm working on it. Okay, I'm really trying. So, and then sidearm Glock 19, just because it's reliable. It's a solid platform. I can conceal it. I can wear it on my side in a hip holster. I can do whatever I want and still feel fully capable with it. It takes, you know, every magazine, you know, down to 15 rounds. So I can throw my Glock 17 mags or the 33 rounders or the 24 rounders in it. And the reliability of that platform is, you know, proven. So I feel like I'd be able to utilize it. So that's basically what I like. Most likely right this second, if I had to choose, I'd probably run out the door with a 300 blackout pistol and a Glock 19, which isn't always the most, what's the best way to say this? Like, I know it's not the right answer, if that makes sense. But for right now, it's what I feel the most comfortable with. And then you know, and actually what Stack and 9mm is saying, probably not the worst idea for me to grab, you know, one of my AR uppers and pack it in. And if I decide it's too much extra weight for no reason, I can toss it. But having a 5.56 upper I can just strap on at any point might not be the worst idea.
Yeah, or like have a 5.56 upper in your vehicle or something like that with a few magazines full. Yeah, and you know, even here in Alaska, my ARs are all all 5.56. I don't own a 300 blackout. I planned on it at one point, but I just don't own one. You know, I have a precision rifle and 6.5 Creedmoor, and or Needmore or Soy Boy or whatever people want to call it these days. But it's it's a great caliber, and people that hate on it haven't never shot it, but it shoots pretty flat compared to 308. You know, it doesn't shoot flat compared to 270 or 7 mag, but it shoots really flat compared to 308. And you know, I'm considering building an AR-10 and 6.5 Creedmoor, since I already have a whole ton of ammo I've stocked up for 6.5 Creedmoor. And the cool thing, my precision rifle and my wife's hunting rifle both shoot the same ammo really well. It's not the most accurate out of her hunting rifle, but it's still a sub MOA, right around a minute of angle, an inch at 100 yards. And we're shooting the 127 grain Barnes LRX. And I would take the 127 grain Barnes LRX over a 5.56 any day of the week, to be honest with you. So I got a Bergara HMR, which I think is just an awesome rifle, and it's getting half, you know, 9/16 of an inch edge to edge group at 100 yards, 5-shot group is the best I've gotten with it so far, and that's just after the barrel break in. So imagine what it's going to do as it gets in. So so one last question for you. So I'm running into this issue with prepping. I have celiac disease with IBS. And so my current diet has there's no gluten, there's no dairy, there's no soy, there's no corn, there's no peas or pea protein. There's beans that I can eat and feel like a normal human being without coffee percolated stomach. And there's various other things that I can't eat as well, like broccoli and you know, copious amounts of onions, broccoli, asparagus, which, you know, I've always hated broccoli anyway, so I'm not really worried about that. But for somebody who's a prepper, what do you recommend for like special diets? Like there's not a Mountain House food I can eat, so I can't put that away. You know what I mean? So basically, there's an anti-American saying right there. Anyway,
hey, a lot of Glock haters, and I totally get it. All right, and it took me until Gen 5 to finally buy Glocks. Okay. But at the end of the day, there is a track record there. That's just me. So
I have 7 of them, and not a one's a Gen 5. So, gluten. All rice is gluten free, and so I've been stocking up on rice. I do feel like that. Like the Augustin Farms, Augustin Foods, I've seen their gluten free options, but for me, there's still soy and dairy in a lot of that food, and there's still pea protein. Yeah. Here's the thing: when I go to buy fake cheese made by Daiya or one of those things, and it actually does taste okay, but it has pea protein in it to substitute for the soy or whatever, or it has soy in it to substitute for wheat or whatever they mix in with the cheese. So I can't eat any of it. Like the one I can't eat is this cream cheese made by Kite. And half this stuff is probably like liberal hippie food. I'm supporting it, gun control, but it's what I got to eat.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Well, I think honestly. So like I'm on a diet right now just because I'm trying to be healthier. And I work in the hospitality industry, so I have access to crazy food that I can eat all the time, and it's really difficult to not just indulge constantly, right? So, being on a limited diet, it's definitely kind of helped, made me look for alternative options out there. And what I would suggest, and this is unfortunately expensive, but, if you could invest in a freeze dryer, then you can store any food you want long-term that will actually work for your diet. And I feel like if you're on a strict diet, because we know even if you're not on a strict diet, if there's an SHTF event where we all have to start eating all that food we stockpile, we're all going to have really messed up stomachs for a while, because it's just a lot of getting used to a completely new diet. So for your situation, it might be worth that investment to look at and say, this is a lot of money up front, but then you can then store all the food that's actually going to keep you going without making you sick during some kind of an emergency event. And if, like you said, you can have rice. So that's a great staple food you can stockpile and store now. But then you could freeze dry things like meat, which, generally is going to be okay for you to eat. But if you buy it freeze dried from the store, it's like 5 or 6 times as expensive as it would be if you could do it yourself. So that initial investment is big, because I think the cheapest you can get a freeze dryer at right now, I want to say it's like $2,400, right? Like they're pretty expensive. But if you spend $2,400 strictly on freeze dried meat, you really want to get that much food in the sense of how long it will last. So sometimes that initial hit is expensive, but then you'll be able to start stocking food for years because it will store forever. And eventually you'll definitely gain all of that investment back and more. Especially where you're at in Alaska, where you're hunting and you're bringing home, big game, and you have tons and tons of meat that you could stash away. If you freeze dry it, it's going to last you forever, and then you can just, basically rice and meat, which is not the worst diet. People have lived off that for centuries. So that would be my suggestion, which isn't the easiest route because it is expensive, but if I'm worried about preparedness and I have a specific medical condition that makes me have a certain type of diet, then I feel like it's worth that investment, or else you're going to find yourself in a way worse situation. If not only are we facing like a really bad emergency and a big SHTF event, but you also can't keep food down and you're constantly feeling ill because of what you have to consume just to stay alive, and that takes you out of the fight.
Yeah, it would definitely take me out of the fight. It's pretty much prevented me from what's like ever serving in the military or have been served in the military or anything like that. So looks like a lot of people are getting out of here. Have a good night. Leech Phillip is there. R4 Mississippi Thunder is gone. Looks like brownies for my fat. Speaking of food, he's going. Those are gluten-free brownies, gluten and dairy soy free brownies for my fat. And there's enough sugar in there. They make you fat still. I'm proof of that. But anyway, it was a great chat, and I want to have you back on sometime. And if you start a live stream, let me know. I just think that there's a lot to prepare for pretty soon. So I'm glad you're on the show to answer some questions. Any final
to be honest,
coming out?
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Is there any final thoughts or videos you have coming out you want to talk to people?
Okay, well, I'll say tomorrow night at 7:30 Central Time. So I guess, well, that's 10:30 your time, right?
No, that's
or no, that's 4:30 your time.
4:30 my time.
So tomorrow night, 7:30 Central Time, I'll be doing a live stream on my channel with Alaska Prepper. So, I'm keeping it in Alaska apparently right now.
Yeah.
Even though it does get colder here in North Dakota sometimes, I just had to flex that real quick. But yeah, I'll be chatting with him just about. He does a thing called payday preps, which is something I budget as well. So we're just going to talk about like each other's version of the payday prep and like what we allocate funds towards and stuff like that. And then I will say that now that I have my 460 rifle all set up and I've got my 460 revolver ready to go, I can finally make my way up towards you and feel prepared for what that climate throws at you. So
there you go. Well, You're welcome anytime. You got a place to stay, so come on up when you want to fish next summer. I recommend coming in the summer.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, I want to do. I haven't been to Alaska before, so I really want to check it out.
Yeah. I will take you a place grayling fishing out in the wilderness where you are fishing for grayling and you are bear meat the entire time. So,
that's my kind of fishing trip. Yeah.
And then salmon fishing. Grayling is good if you eat it right there on the shore. Terrible if you freeze it. But so you got to cook it right there on the shore, and then the bears are smelling it. It's great. Yeah. So it's like Dan O'Neill just subbed for you, and I saw a few other people did. I know who was it? Drop It Like It's Scott just did. Also said that. So.
Well, I appreciate it, and I talk a lot about firearms on my channel just because it's a passion of mine, and it's something that is still pertinent to prepping. So definitely, I'm going to start doing probably like a weekly live stream. So we'll definitely get you on over on my channel next time, and we can get some of your expertise on ballistics and ammunition types and loads, because that's something that comes up a lot. Like if you got to pick one rifle, what is the best caliber, what's the best chambering? So those are things that we could definitely discuss on another night.
Yeah, definitely. John Fazer says he calls BS on the colder. John lives in Tok, Alaska, so he's probably seen like -70. Okay. He's on the show sometimes. Like in Anchorage, being surrounded by mountains and in the valley where I live now, it's not that bad. But yeah. Upstate New York, upstate Michigan, upstate, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, they all get colder than Alaska because there's nothing blocking the wind coming from Canada, whereas I have blocking the wind coming from the North Pole. But Anchorage is interesting. There's a few years ago where we got nothing but rain all winter. It warmed up and rained just like it did in Georgia because El Nino or whatever. So that's that. What is the name of your guest? Alaskan Ballistics. This is Magic Prepper. So make sure you've seen them. All right. So yeah. Thanks for coming on over, Sophia, and thank you very much, everybody, for watching tonight. And we're going to go ahead and end tonight's broadcast. I have a new video coming out every Wednesday. I had a video come out today on my music channel, Boss Custom Music Writing, where I write classical music. And so make sure you go check that out. And hopefully we'll get on to Late Night Gun Chat again next week. And we will see all y'all later. And just go subscribe to Magic Prepping if you haven't already.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right.